The movie begins with a man trying to escape from a prison in Chile through an underground tunnel. In 1990, many protesters were arrested in Santiago, Chile. At that time, the military regime was very cruel, and the president who led Chile was a dictator. Protesters are considered terrorists who must be monitored 24 hours a day. The prison was so tight that the prisoners couldn't escape. Unbeknownst to them, the detained protesters will actually be sentenced to death. Among the prisoners, 5 demonstrators gathered under their chief prisoner named Vargas. When the warden determines the prison room, they plan to escape, because they don't want to spend the rest of their lives in prison. Having been calculated by Vargas, room number 50 on the second floor was ideal for escaping. But unfortunately, room number 50 had been taken by another prisoner, so they were forced to stay in room number 51. While in prison, prisoners are given the freedom to have fun, such as playing football or singing. In this free time, Vargas and his friends devise a plan to escape. Since Vargas was an architect, he was in charge of designing their escape route. He knew that not far from there was a river called Mapoco surrounded by many trees. According to Vargas, they had to dig a 70-meter-long tunnel, which meant tens of tons of soil had to be transported up the tunnel. For this kind of heavy work, they need the help of many people. Besides that, he also felt confused about where to throw that much land without the guards knowing. Unbeknownst to them, another prisoner named Bigate was watching them. He intended to join them in carrying out their plan. However, when he volunteered with Vargas, Vargas said they didn't need additional people yet. Vargas' refusal made Bigate very upset, but he ignored it. They continued to check into the lower room, where they would open the tunnel later. After that, they also checked the floor. Vargas also said they couldn't break the floor to make the tunnel entrance, so they decided to destroy the wall. Later, the wall's debris will be made into a concrete cover that can be opened and closed to hide the entrance to the tunnel. Then the excavated soil will be stored on the roof of the detention room because only that room can hold tens of tons of soil. However, the problem is that they do not have adequate digging equipment to make holes. Then a prisoner gave him a screwdriver, after which Vargas invited him to join their escape mission. Now that the equipment is ready, Vargas and friends begin to drill holes in the concrete roof. They had to do it quietly for fear of being overheard by the warden. Then they called in prisoner male guitarists to play guitar to drown out the sound of their work. When the roof was destroyed, Vargas asked his friends to bring eggs for him. It turned out that the eggs would be mixed with lime to make lighter concrete, so they could easily open the roof lid. After that, they closed it with a poster of Maria Ozawa. Not long after, the warden suddenly conducted a raid. Luckily, their work was done, so their room was cleaned. When the warden checked the room, he removed all the sexy posters in the room. But he doesn't remove the poster attached to the roof because he likes Maria Ozawa. Day after day, they continued to dig with minimal equipment, including using a fragile tablespoon. Without realizing, they have been in prison for 34 days, so that prisoners can be visited and meet with their families. Vargas's friend, Rafael, also meets his wife, but she doesn't bring her children even though Rafael already misses them. A few days later, Vargas and his friends experimented with making a better concrete cover because the previous cover was not similar to the original. Then they made a wooden box filled with cement. They received news of an impromptu warden raid in the middle of their work. They rushed to tidy up their messy room. Luckily, when the warden came in, they had already finished cleaning the room. When the situation was clear, Vargas and his friends destroyed the walls again and turned up the radio volume to drown out the sound of their work. After they felt it was wide enough, they tried to install the concrete box that had been made, which turned out to be the right size. Soon afterward, they began to dig up the soil and transported it to their rooms for storage on the roof. So as not to be suspected, as much as possible, Vargas and friends continue to carry out activities usually carried out by prisoners in prison. So far, the tunnels they had dug were still short. Therefore, they needed additional people to escape from the prison faster. If they continued digging tunnels with a few personnel, they feared their plans would be exposed first. The next day, a member of the Vargas group, German, was intercepted by the warden when he was about to dispose of the land. He was asked to show the contents of his bag, which made him nervous. Luckily, German had anticipated it, so only his belongings would be seen when he opened his bag. The warden believed him and asked him to come with him. Before leaving, German passed his bag to Vargas. At that time, German thought he would be punished by the warden, but apparently, the warden had offered him an adult magazine. While German was talking with the warden, his friends continued to make tunnels while listening to the radio. Accidentally, they heard the news on the radio that the president of Chile, a dictator, had been overthrown. Hearing the news, they were even more motivated to speed up the excavation process. On the 86th day, Vargas and his friends gathered the prisoners sentenced to death. Instead of them having to resign themselves to waiting for death, Vargas offered them to at least try to escape. But the working hours of prisoners on death row will differ from other prisoners. Prisoners sentenced to death must be willing to work harder every 2 hours to dig and dispose of soil. So that their work would not be suspected by others, they took the initiative to make an earth drain hole connected to the roof. Despite their efforts to prevent the leak of activities, it seems that their movements are suspected by a prisoner named Oscar. Suddenly, Oscar offered to join Vargas and his friends, but many group members turned him down because he liked to complain. Oscar also threatens to tell the warden about their activities, forcing them to accept him to join. When the tunnel was almost finished, they realized this plan would be in vain without outside help. What they need now is to contact their friends who are fellow protesters. Surely, they will want to help Vargas and his friends to escape. On day 182, Rafael's wife came to see him. He asks his wife to help gather a group of Vargas and friends. His wife is not sure that her efforts will succeed, but she will still try to do it for her husband. On the 205th day, a large group of guards came to conduct a massive raid. Vargas told the guitarist guy in the tunnel to get out quickly. However, he needs a long time to get out of there because he has to crawl slowly. While other prisoners help the guitarist, Rafael sacrifices himself by provoking the guards into a brawl. This method is expected to buy time until the guitarist comes out. As a result of the incident, those involved in the brawl were dried naked in the hot sun. Especially for Rafael, as a provocateur, was thrown into a narrow room dubbed the hotel as his punishment. Meanwhile, Rafael's wife tries to persuade the protesters to help Vargas and his friends outside the prison. But unfortunately, they do not want to help because it would be risky. Despite that problem, she's not easily given up. She came to Vargas's dad, German's wife, and Rafael's old friend. Luckily, they all wanted to help Vargas and his friends escape. On day 392, a prisoner fainted in the tunnel due to a lack of oxygen. This usually happens when the tunnel is very deep. To overcome this obstacle, they recruited another prisoner, who was a carpenter, because they need his refining machine to make underground oxygen lines. While Vargas and his friends are about to finish the tunnel, Bigate decides to become a warden spy. Bigate is assigned to provide information about the situation in prison for a packet of cigarettes. Shortly after, the tunnels that Vargas and his friends dug finally crossed the prison border. Rafael sprayed red liquid as a sign for the team that would help them from outside. However, when Vargas's dad saw the red location, he thought it was too close to the guard tower. The next day, Vargas' dad visited him in prison to give him the information. Based on that information, they had to continue to dig further so as not to be hit by the light of the guard tower. On the 558th day, an earthquake suddenly made all the prisoners scatter. As Vargas ran out with them, he remembered that his group was still left there. So, he decided to immediately go back inside and evacuate his friends. Fortunately, there were no casualties in the incident, and the tunnel hole did not collapse. But if it is shaken by the earthquake again, then the tunnel will be destroyed. The day before escaping, Vargas thought of the one and only prisoner who was crippled. Vargas felt sorry for him and offered to run away with him, but the prisoner refused because he was unable to crawl. Instead, he told if Vargas and his friends manage to escape, he wants them to convey his message to his family before he is sentenced to death. While the prisoners were watching television together, Vargas took the opportunity to launch his action. They left the room one by one to avoid arousing the warden's suspicion. However, Bigate realized that they had left the television room. With his cunning brain, Bigate came to Vargas' room to catch their act. But on the way there, he was confronted by the crippled prisoner. This incident convinced him even more that they were carrying out their plan to escape. While in room 51, Vargas immediately attended to all the prisoners who had arrived. There are about 50 prisoners who are ready to enter the tunnel, so with that large number, they must enter the tunnel one by one in an orderly manner. Oscar was assigned to guard the entrance of the tunnel. When Bigate reached the room, he only saw Oscar alone. At that moment, he saw a big hole in the wall. This made him even more convinced that Vargas and his friends had escaped. Knowing that information, Bigate intended to report the matter to the military, but Oscar prevented him. Oscar wouldn't let his only hope of escape from prison be crushed by Bigate. With all his might, Oscar beat him until he was unconscious. Even though Oscar had defeated him, he was injured by Bigate's attack, so that makes Oscar unable to crawl into the tunnel. On the other hand, Vargas and his friends were already at the end of the tunnel, waiting for the team from outside to open the tunnel passage from the outside. Not long after, the road door opened, so they immediately got out of there. Rafael's wife had prepared a change of clothes for all of them. After changing their clothes, they hid around the Mapoco River while waiting for the bus to pick them up. A few moments later, the bus arrived. They immediately got on the bus. German sensed a lack of prisoners, and it turned out to be Oscar. Feeling worried, German followed him into the tunnel, so the bus had to wait for him. Unfortunately, he did not manage to bring Oscar with him. With limited time, they finally decided to leave from there. Meanwhile, in prison, since these escapes were carried out en masse, it is not surprising that other prisoners realized that their numbers were drastically reduced. The prisoners entered Varga's room, and after seeing a hole, they also wanted to run away. Unfortunately, not long after, the warden came there. As a result, the guards arrested the prisoners who had not had time to escape, including Oscar. News of the mass escape of the prisoners was immediately conveyed to military officials. It also made military officials angry because his position would certainly be threatened. On the other hand, prisoners who managed to escape were given some money and fake identities for their provisions by Raphael's wife. Then the prisoners were divided into groups and dropped off at different places. After Vargas got off the bus, he said his last goodbyes to Raphael. After that, the prisoners chose their own paths. The escape of 49 prisoners is the largest attempted escape in Chile's history. After that incident, some lived abroad, and some were forgiven by the president. The film ends. The moral that can be learned is that achieving success requires genius, and mutual cooperation is the main key.